we have to be able to see children's behavior in a different way in order for that behavior to change. However, it's really about transforming ourselves first, right? Because again, nothing fixes behavior externally. It's all about how we relate and respond to them. It's all about the relationship and how we choose to show up in that relationship. And a lot of times too, we get to this point and it's like, okay, it's not about their behavior, it's about me and how I respond to it. Well, then, we kind of go to the, I must be wrong, or I'm doing it wrong, or I'm messing up my kid. And so you're not doing it wrong. Nobody's doing it wrong. You're doing it exactly right because you're doing what you know. You're doing what you think is best for your child, and that is the right thing to do. It doesn't have to necessarily be right or wrong. It's one way, right? There's lots of different ways. That's one way. If it's not being effective, then you might learn something else. And so the awareness of, I could do something different is the key to change, because we can't change anything that we're not aware of. So when we see children differently, here's the cool part. When we see them differently, they see themselves differently. So wouldn't it be cool if they could feel good about who they are? Because when we feel good about who we are, we bring an energy to the world that's more positive, right? And we have to feel good, and children have to feel good about who they are before they can feel good about other people and responding positively. So when sometimes we think, well, they deserve it, right? They might deserve, to be treated one way. But when we do that, we really are kind of invested more in blame and punishment than we are in change. Or we might just be triggered and unable to see it another way in that moment. And that's okay too, because again, we can change that as we become more aware of it. But how we respond to children and how we respond to acting out behavior trains them to see it that way as well. And so, I think I've talked about this before, like when I implemented these skills into my classroom, over time, it didn't happen right away, it took, a few years to learn some of this well enough to teach it to the children. But in time, it took away the good kid, bad kid mentality. There were no bad kids anymore, because when the adults in the classroom saw the acting out behavior as a call for help and, oh, we can help you solve this problem, then that's what children saw it as. They saw it as a time to, oh, that person needs help. And they reached out a hand and rubbed their back, or, whatever it was that they could contribute at that time. And so I think the really cool thing is, though, that how we respond to them, really, when we see them differently, they see themselves differently, and everybody else in the environment sees them differently. And that can play into sibling rivalry too. When we see behavior as a time to help others, then that helps with that sibling rivalry piece. Because if we have the mentality of somebody always has to be at fault or at blame, somebody always has to be right, problem with that, somebody always has to be wrong. And so that's a breeding ground for sibling rivalry. The other thing too is when we see it as they deserve this, it switches the focus from what the situation is, what the problem is, to you. It switches it to mean adult. And that causes anger and resentment, and that doesn't help transform behavior. It heightens it. Or the other thing it does is it turns it from the problem to I'm bad. And when not I did something bad, but I am bad. And that also heightens behavior, because when we feel bad about ourselves, we don't make good choices. So we can be the model for children in how to see behavior differently. So here's a activity that we can do.